Well, diversity, equity and inclusion has suffered its final mortal blow. DEI has been about simply ramming down and enforcing viewpoints and ideologies rather than delivering good services and products and rewarding effort and excellence. It's a form of Marxism which has never worked. And there's been a cultural tipping point. DEI has died. Let's check it out. So I'm sure you have heard of DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion. The problem is that it's anything but that. But it has been the new deity in town, the DEI, see what I did there? That all must worship. Diversity equals identity politics defined by your sexuality, gender, race, colour, disability, all called intersectionality. You're a victim. Inclusion, we include everyone, but it's based on their definition. Language defined by the left, their definition of marriage, gender, sexuality, decolonisation, environmentalism, critical theory based on certain racial groups being victims, and white people being oppressors. And equity, which is Marxism 101. Everyone must have the same outcome, irrespective of effort, talent, or character. But what DEI actually is deception. It's confusion around gender, sexuality, and disunity. It's racial conflict. There's inequality because it results in special rights for special groups, the groups that I've just mentioned, and exclusion, cancel culture if your views don't align with the new woke virtues. But the expectation has been that every business, every charity, every organisation should adopt this philosophy, especially after Black Lives Matter arose, BLM, from the death of George Floyd in 2020, which we'll come back to. But the DEI narrative seems to be slowly dying. Now, it's partly because Donald Trump has removed any hint of it in any government department in the US since his inauguration, but it was already crumbling, even before that. Here's a One News and Associated Press report from just last month. McDonald's has joined a growing list of companies that are pulling back on diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives. Conservative activists have gone after companies both in the courts and on social media, seeking to set a similar precedent in the working world. They've been targeting workplace initiatives such as diversity programs and hiring practices that prioritise historically marginalised groups and have widened their objections to include programs focused on gender identity and sexual orientation. No, it's companies obsessed on woke stuff like LGBT, environmental alarmism, and critical theory. That's a better explanation. And the report highlights other companies who are ditching the wokeness. A couple of American companies, Walmart, some of the changes Walmart will be enacting as a U-turn on its DEI initiatives, removing any products sold that may have inappropriate transsexual content for children, such as chest binders for teenagers, or books encouraging transition. They're stopping funding events that could expose children to sexually inappropriate content, such as drag queen story hours or pride events. Superb. Remember Target, which had those tuck-friendly swimsuits to help boys look like girls, to conceal their male genitalia? Well, in June last year, the brand pulled Pride Month merchandise from 2,000 stores, which was a huge reversal for a store which had been selling LGBT items in most locations since 2013. And remember, I talked about this, these woke Ford vehicles, the very gay Raptor they called it. They said they're going to continue to put their effort and resources into taking care of customers, our teams and our communities, versus publicly commenting on many polarising issues of the day. Good thinking, Ford. Harley-Davidson, hard to believe they're woke, eh? Harley-Davidson said it would reevaluate its sponsorships and affiliations to retain its loyal riding community. Who know what biology is. At the same time, it revealed plans to remove socially motivated content from employee training programs. John Deere, that some of you will know about, released a statement distancing itself from DEI, affirming it will no longer support external social or cultural awareness events, despite previously describing DEI as one of its highest priority topics. Zoom laid off a DEI team earlier this last year, saying it would be working with external consultants moving forward. Google and Meta Facebook also made cuts to DEI following their previous pledges. In this article, Microsoft has been one of the many companies that pledged to spend millions of dollars to hire more people of colour. And in 2020, the Microsoft CEO sent an email to employees saying the company had committed to take action to help address racial injustice and inequity, and unequivocally believed that Black Lives Matter, end quote. But in a recent email, the DEI team was eliminated due to changing business needs. Now, even left-wing woke CNN admits that this is all happening. And of course, the classic example was Bud Light and using a transgender to advertise it. They lost more than $1 billion over their virtue signalling and wokeness. And the most recent one is Facebook, or Meta, as it's now called. They're no longer having a dedicated DEI team, and they're going to focus on business suppliers from diversely owned businesses. And they're going to focus especially on small and mid-sized businesses, which, quote, power much of our economy, end quote. Now, is this the Trump effect? Has his election led to a backlash against wokeness and a return to sanity? Well, let's hope so, but why did all these, and look, it was happening even well before Trump was elected. This has all been happening last year, and it's speeding up. But why did all these companies think that wokeness was a winner? Well, one report by Adweek says this. Not this one. In 2020, after a Minneapolis police officer murdered George Floyd, protests by civil rights group Black Lives Matter galvanized corporate America to take action. In the months after, household names like Microsoft, Uber, Target, and Cisco publicly pledged to create various internal programs to foster diversity, equity, and inclusion. But hot-button issues like race, environmentalism, abortion, gender ideology, LGBT are now risky, which sounds good. Now, the Wall Street Journal recently published an article about how the consulting firm McKinsey announced well back 9 years ago, or 10 years ago, 2015, that it had found a link between profits and racial and gender diversity. And this research was used by investors, lobbyists, and regulators to push for more women and minority groups on boards and to justify investing in companies that appointed them. In other words, it just made the companies woke. But the truth soon came out. And in this article, it says, according to the Wall Street Journal, academics have tried to repeat McKinsey's findings and failed, concluding that there is no link between profitability and executive diversity. The only thing that the study found was that big companies that are highly profitable could more easily afford to simply promote DEI with fewer consequences. In other words, they can afford to be woke and virtue signal. A company that's scrambling to launch itself doesn't have that luxury. You see, it's fascinating. Here's the key. They say it's about inclusion and diversity, but it's not. Try going into a DEI meeting and reading the Bible verses on marriage, or on being created male and female, or that we are all one in the sight of the Lord. Now, try that. Now, we've seen some hints of the decline of DEI and pride even here in New Zealand. For example, there was an almost 20% drop in the number of schools doing Pride Week in schools last year. And that's despite the media and the Ministry of Education marketing and cajoling schools to do it. Schools want to get on with educating, not indoctrinated. And we've noticed that companies have gone a little quieter around the whole LGBT's Pink Shirt Day and Pride Month. And so it'll be interesting to note just what it's like for this year. Now, you can see some of, this bit of advertising here, some of the DEI policies for our companies on our fantastic website, wokeup.nz. As the website says, DEI is fixated on differences in race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation and disability. Devotees claim that DEI will enhance organisations by making them more diverse, but DEI undermines meritocracy as it encourages the hiring and promotion of employees based on their race, sex or other acceptable characteristics, rather than on their skill, competence and work ethic. And what the site shows is that DEI drives this 40-40-20 ratio at senior levels of employment. What does that mean? Well, 40% is men, 40% women, and 20% other genders. Now, do a search on Air New Zealand, ANZ, ASB, Kiwibank, One NZ, Starbucks, Spark, The Warehouse, Southern Cross. Whew, there's a lot of wokeness there, but of course our police force are also wanting to be very woke. They're proud to march with pride. It's a different pride to the one you're probably thinking of. And marketing for police officers, diversity.
Interested in joining the New Zealand Police or finding information, please visit the New Zealand Police website and be in touch with our diversity liaison officers, who are located all over New Zealand.
Yep, and of course the New Zealand Defence Force, who probably should focus more on how to release the autopilot than the gender and sexuality preferences of their staff or how many blokes and females they have.
New Zealand Defence Force is really stepping up its commitment to gender equity. From the top of the organisation down, it's been adopting pledges to treat women well, to be more inclusive, and they are world leading in adopting such commitments.
And by actually having our senior people sign a gender equality charter, we're actually saying we are committed and we will be held accountable for our action.
The charter itself is accompanied by a workshop, so it's not just a sign and go. People are actually thinking about what can they do, what's going on for their people, how can they support everyone having a good experience of the organisation and everyone getting their unique needs met.
Yeah, the danger is that when you focus on woke and virtue signalling, sometimes you forget some of the basics, like how to turn off the autopilot. Now, interestingly enough, I was reading a report from Surf Life Saving New Zealand, and it said this: the success of a program that's getting more women surf lifeguards in the driver's seat of an IRB, which is those motorised boats that come and rescue you, has prompted the formation of a new group on the back of Wahine on Water. Surf Life Saving New Zealand has formed the Women in Life Saving Project Group, a team of women who will work to understand what the barriers are to girls and women taking part in all aspects of surf lifesaving and sport. Wahine on Water was developed as a way to address the fact that in 2017, while 50% of New Zealand surf lifeguards were women, 50%, so it's half and half, sounds like equity there, only 28% of inflatable rescue boat drivers, IRB, were women. They discovered that many women were intimidated by IRBs, felt they weren't encouraged to get involved in IRB training, that there was a lack of women role models and training opportunities. Wahine on Water addresses those issues by pairing less experienced women lifeguards with experienced women IRB mentors. Participants take part in activities and drills such as driving skills and reversing trailers. No comment. Now, I had a look at the report in a little bit more depth. And look, if we're going to be woke, we need to be woke. I had a look at this chart. White female lifesavers are 92%. But white people are only 2/3 of New Zealanders. Surf lifesaving has a white problem. And the last thing I want as a woke swimmer is to be saved by someone who is white and represents a privileged group. I would rather drown than be saved by a racist organisation. But anyway, DEI suffered what I think was a mortal blow a couple of weeks during the devastating and tragic Los Angeles fires in the US. Now, according to media reports and the public relations video that re-emerged from a couple of years before, the Deputy Chief, Christine Larson, who heads the Equity and Human Rights Bureau of the fire department, defended the fire department's use of DEI hiring practices. But here's the bit that really sort of racked people up.
See somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
Yeah, it was that last statement that really got people annoyed. Many online said they don't care what their rescuers look like. And if they did, they would want somebody who appeared physically fit for the dangerous job. In a burning building situation, I can assure you I don't want someone who looks like me. Now, it's been a terrible look at a time when the people of LA want the best, most capable firefighters to save their homes and communities. They don't want a woke quota to virtue signal. And I think you'll be like me. If I'm drowning at sea, I don't care what the religion, race, gender, sexuality, political preference, or marriage status of the lifesaver is. I just want them to know how to get me back on land. End of. In fact, I never knew this, but during the tragic Maui fires in Hawaii in 2023, the former Deputy Director of the Hawaii Commission on Water Resource Management waited for more than 5 hours to release water during the wildfires that devastated Maui, according to reports. Now, Kaleo Manuel described water as a sacred god and said access to water should be predicated on conversations about equity.
And using modern techniques to kind of elevate how we use water today, right? And we can be mindful of our impacts to the resource. And with that context, it's like the traditional system was really built on collective contribution and benefit, and not the individual benefit of a specific project over others, right? There was always this communal, you put in and you get out, right? But that's totally different in this Western capitalistic kind of economy that we live in. It's very extractive, individualistic approaches. And when you get into that space, you create the whiskeys for drinking, waters for fighting scenario where it's us and them. And so, we all need water to live. So really my motto is always like, let water connect us and not divide us. Like we can share it, but it requires true conversations about equity, like water equity. It's not something that's talked about a lot, but understanding how do we, in this island space that we occupy, in this short period of time we're here, how do we leave it better?
Okay, talking about water, I think when there's a fire, you just want the water. And here was the head of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Now remember, talking about water and power.
I call it powered by equity, and I know that it's been really important for the DWP to put an equity lens on everything.
Yes. Yeah. And that's the number one thing that attracted me to this role. Coming from the communities that I come, seeing what I've seen through my career in utilities and through the military. I've been in the Coast Guard 19 and a half years now, so I got 6 more months to qualify for my 20 years, which was my original goal. It's important to me that everything we do, it's with an equity lens and social justice, and making sure that we right the wrongs that we've done in the past from an infrastructure perspective, and that we involve the community in that process. And this utility is serious about it, is authentic about it. And so I'm just super excited to be part of it.
Yeah, the problem was that there was no water in LA. Part of the problem, dams weren't full. People just want water and dams to be full, especially when there's a fire. In fact, I read a recent article from Mercatornet called Why Los Angeles is Burning. It's worth reading in full. But it says, in 2014, Californians voted overwhelmingly for funding a $7.5 billion bond to construct new water reservoirs and dams, and it was supposed to be built by 1st of January 2022. It's now 2025 and no reservoirs have been built. California is the leading agricultural state in the nation, but for years politicians slashed water allotments and shut off ag pumps to farmers in an effort to save a finger-length, minnow-like fish called the Delta smelt. And LA Mayor slashed the city's fire budget by $17.6 million just recently, but she's put in $950 million for homelessness. And guess what? The previous year, almost 14,000 homeless fires were started in Los Angeles alone, almost double the number in 2020. So she's almost funding the fires rather than dealing with the issue. Now, just finally, there was an excellent feature story in the New Zealand Herald last year backing up exactly what I'm saying. Woke culture, why millennials and Gen Zers are facing a backlash from the left. And just a couple of quick extracts. Victoria, a mother, is a feminist Green Party supporter with a socialist centre-left views. Victoria isn't the only one of her Liberal friends who think the pendulum has swung too far, making young people overly sensitive to other points of view and out of touch with reality. Now, like most of the white middle-class parents in her social circle, Victoria has little in common with either ACT voters or the conservative Christian base of Family First. But even she finds herself struggling with uber-woke Gen Zers and millennials who feel triggered by the use of certain words or when someone merely disagrees with them. What annoys her most is the shallowness of virtue signalling on social media, where it's important to be seen aligning with the right causes, from mental health and the trans community to Black Lives Matter and the war in Gaza. It's a fascinating read and probably why those on the left definitely don't like our Woke Up website. But then, just a couple of weeks ago, the final nail, courtesy of President Trump, he signed the executive order abolishing DEI bureaucracy in the federal government. He's basically signed the death warrant for DEI. The tide has turned. There's a cultural tipping point. DEI totally deserves to die, and I hope that New Zealand companies are listening. Oh, and by the way, there are only two sexes again. It's a policy of the United States to recognise two sexes, male and female. Do you get the feeling that adults are finally back in charge of our culture again?